Good morning, all. Good morning. I'm thrilled to welcome you here to the Organization for Responsible Governance first Good Governance Conference. My name is Matt Aubrey. I'm the Executive Director for the Organization for Responsible Governance. We're a not-for-profit, Bahamian not-for-profit that really works on how do we address and look at the long-term issues that have been plaguing the Bahamas and look at how we can bring together civil society, government, the private sector, the media, academia, the churches, because all of us have a responsibility and a part of what that solution can be to sustain. So it's thrilling to look out and see that we have representatives from all of those folks here. I want to officially, though, start off our session just to get us off on the right foot with a prayer. So I'm going to ask our esteemed friend, Dr. Anthony Hamilton, from the President of Civil Society Bahamas, to step up and please lead us in a brief prayer of welcome, and then we can get started with our protocol.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, all. May we stand for prayer, please? Let us pray. Our Father, we are indeed grateful for your loving kindness toward us, that we're privileged to be here in the land of the living today, to allow you to be honored, magnified, and glorified as this session is convened. May you cause wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to prevail. Cause us to be open and honest in the midst of our dialogue, and the end results be pleasing unto you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. I'd like to formally recognize those members of our government that have graciously given of their time today to join us. I'd like to welcome and thank the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Tourism, Investment, and Aviation, the Honorable Chester Cooper. Thank you so much for being here, sir. I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition and Member of Parliament, Michael Pintard. Thank you very much for being here, sir. And I know it's a busy week, so we really appreciate that. I'd like to thank and recognize the Minister for the Environment and Natural Resources, the Honorable Vaughn Miller. Thank you so much. I would like to also recognize the Minister of State for the Environment, the Honorable Basil McIntosh. We also have some of our wonderful senators here, so I'd like to also recognize Senator the Honorable Ronald Duncombe, Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell. I think those are the two that and if I've missed anyone, I do apologize. We also have folks from our government service. So we have Permanent Secretary Dr. Donna Miller from the Ministry of Finance. Thank you so much for being here. I've already acknowledged, but I want to just formally do so, the President of Civil Society Bahamas, Dr. Anthony Hamilton. And I know we have a number of other senior government officials, and so I really thank them for being here. I would like to take a quick minute, though, a quick second to formally also recognize two really important groups. We have a contingent of folks from C.R. Walker High School who are here in the form of Brianna Shearer, James Smith, and Patrice Saunders. Can we give them a round of applause? Although this could be a really innovative way of getting out of classes today. We really appreciate you joining us. Similarly, though, I was quite excited to see a contingent of blue coats who walked in, a group behind us who represent the University of the Bahamas student government who've joined us today. So please, a round of applause for them as well. We're going to get started very quickly and get right into the proceedings. When I look around the room, and this is our first event after this COVID crisis, and it feels a bit odd to be back in physical proximity, but there's a real power in it. I also noticed we haven't fully filled out the room, which reminds me of Matthew 7:14, which is, "For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life. There are a few that find it." So we are the few. Hopefully a few more will come in, but I also want to recognize those folks who are participating virtually across the archipelago on our webinar, our Zoom webinar, as well as through our Facebook page. So we hope folks will continue to be a part of that and we'll get comments in. And I'd also like to recognize Miss Annette Lund, who is with us today to ensure that our proceedings are as accessible as possible. And in that role, Aaron Brown as well. I don't know where Aaron ended up. Aaron Brown from the Disability Commission, who has also given us her input to make sure that as many people can participate, regardless of what their scenarios and situations might be. We're glad because we recognize that this is an inclusive space, one that needs to represent all of our perspectives. When we talk about good governance as today, I just wanted to say that it's been shown to improve the lives of citizens, to boost effectiveness and efficiency of government spending and policy making. It increases economic opportunity for the private sector. And even our working draft of the National Development Plan recognizes and says that countries with good governance are not just fairer, they're more stable, with better economies and more developed social capital, and they're able to better deal with the problems that confront them, be they shifts in the global politics and economics or the effects of climate change. As we know, from circumstances in Europe and our last 2 years, there are a lot of things that we can't anticipate that can hit us and affect us. And so building our resilience, building our capacity to manage and determine our own fate as a country is crucial, and governance is a critical step towards that. But it's not just a set of aspirational principles, it's a living, growing, developing thing. So that really is why the theme of our sessions today are the culture of governance. It is something we need to create. It's a for us, by us model. We can't just replicate what folks do in other countries. We need to look at what works in our specific and local context. And the answer lies within each of you, and that's why we're really excited for our sessions today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are thrilled that he was able to join us. I know he's got a busy, busy schedule, but I would like to please join me in welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Chester Cooper.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. Let me stand on the established protocols, but also recognize my cabinet colleagues, parliamentary colleagues, and of course the leader of the opposition. Times have moved so quickly, I'm not sure what to call him, but he's my friend. And I want to thank all of you sincerely for being here. Matt, I hope that the organization, the ORG, will send some observers over to, I believe, Atlantis, where the other side is having an election today. Make sure the leader gets the outcome that he deserves. So it's good to be here and good to see all of you. I have followed the work of ORG since your formation, around about the time when I was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, along with Robbie Myers would have been my vice chair, and I think it was just a few short years after ORG was formed. So I've watched your work, and I thank you for being steadfast. I want to thank you for the role that you play. It is important for all of us to do our part on the issue of governance. Good governance is not just an issue for the government or for the opposition, but we all have a clear role to play. Let me say that we should not take our role on this issue for granted. And sometimes we watch the theater of politics, and we sometimes think that maybe there is a departure from the need for good governance, but I want to assure you that no matter where we sit, we all love our country. And we all want to see the best for our country. And we all sometimes differ in our approaches. We sometimes differ in the level of flexibility and sometimes with the level of transparency and accountability that we deploy. But I want to assure you of the collective commitment of the government on these issues. Certainly, the Davis-Cooper administration stands very strongly in support of good governance, and we will invite you to grade us on the basis of our actions and not just on our talks. Good governance will not simply come through the passing of legislation. Of course, checks and balances exist in abundance today, but yet we find ourselves still calling out for more. We must, of course, balance the bureaucracy and the checks and balances with the ease of doing business, which I know that org also supports. Make no mistake, more guidelines and guidance is needed, but it is our commitment in ensuring that when we speak of good governance, it's for the development and advancement of our country and for the facilitation of orderly business and growth and development. What we preach, the laws we pass, are only worth what we are willing to live with and the principles we are willing to live by. And I will be frank, there are many people who look at the governance in this country and hold a cynical view. But politics and the leadership that is necessary is not for the cynical. Neither is it for those who look at governance as an opportunity to wield influence, to aggrandize themselves and others, or to reward their supporters. Certainly, any party that comes to power will want to put in place people it can trust to effectively execute its policies in line with the guidelines that we set as a country for good governance. But we must strike a balance between policy and personality, and those who govern must first recognize where the power they hold comes from, and that it comes from the citizens who expect and demand good governance. It is a sacred trust that we will act on their behalf and in their best interests. As the masses entrust their power to a select few, those few must be wise, fair, and transparent with how this power is delegated and how it is used. For too long, too many who have come to power have spoken about the abuses that occurred by their predecessors and feigned seriousness about adhering to changes that they proposed. Some have come to office and some have gone abroad and criticized our country, but we have not seen a substantial moving of the needle on the issues. Simply criticizing and proposing change, simply promising change, is no longer good enough. We must either become change agents or drop the facade that change is what we desire. Good governance comes in many forms with many participants. Government alone are not solely responsible for it. It is the duty of all citizens and residents to act together to ensure that good governance is achieved and its true purpose come to fruition. To drive the trajectory of a nation, we must continue to work together on these issues. Each citizen has a role to play. They ensure that they must follow the rules. They must ensure that they follow the rules, that they obey statutes, and that they contribute in their democracy through community, patriotism, and working towards the common good. Civil society plays a role, a varied and multifaceted one. Thank you. The mechanism of government cannot see all at once, cannot be everywhere at once. But a network of concerned, a network of resources, active groups, civil society, can aid the government in bringing issues to the forefront and proposing reasonable measures to address them. There are many other groups that play a significant role as well, but one of the biggest roles is played by the government, the biggest employer, with the biggest budget, with the ability to award, to tax, to police, and to prosecute. The Davis-Cooper administration, the government of the day, is resolute in its commitment to delivering good governance, which equates to integrity, accountability, and equity. This stance fosters a disciplined civil service and ensures access to information, the enforcement of laws and policies, oversight to monitor official actions, transparent budget processes that allocate public funds on a priority scale, and the ability of individuals to seek effective redress when fairness and equity are not observed. A well-functioning system of government also helps to ensure that public policy supports development and that corruption, where it is found, is immediately renounced. The Davis-Cooper administration is not about making empty promises on corruption. We condemn corruption, and we see no role for it in our Bahamas. It makes us weaker. It makes us more vulnerable to shocks. It makes us more vulnerable to hits on our reputation by the international community. It makes us weaker as a society. There are issues that plague countries around the world, big and small, and we must work together doing all that we can to end corruption in all forms throughout our country. Firstly, there must be improved accountability by changing the way we govern and manage finances, how taxpayer money is spent, how we account for procurement on goods and services, how we manage new hires, and how civil servants are rewarded. And I am pleased to say that this government is committed to strict observance of and enhancements to the Public Disclosure Act, which is built on the principles of accountability and transparency. The second element required for good governance involves providing citizens with access to information. The decentralization of government to local governments and communities is consistently vital to allowing more citizens to engage in the decision-making process and the deepening of our democracy. Our government has also pledged to advance the implementation of the Freedom of Information Act to create an atmosphere of access to information where it is needed, unless that information is restricted by specific rules. We will ensure the eventual full implementation of the Freedom of Information Act, which was advanced by a previous Progressive Liberal Party administration and supported by the previous administration. We will advance this. It has been a lot of talk for too long, and I will tell you that our administration is committed to advancing it to fruition. Thirdly, I will say, as the minister with responsibility for investments, it is the goal of my ministry to push to improve the efficiency of processes for both foreign and domestic investments by eliminating unnecessary red tape and other avenues to engender a culture of transparency, a culture of change for economic growth as we enhance the ease of doing business in the Bahamas. We are looking for quality and sustainable investments. We are looking for investors who meet the fit and proper test. Fourth, this government of transparency is committed to political reforms with a legislative agenda that includes the full implementation of campaign finance reforms and electoral reforms. And let me hasten to acknowledge that you have heard a lot of this before, and you have heard some of it over and over and over. And let me also acknowledge the cynicism that comes when persons in power, whether the last administration or the one before, make these commitments and very little tangible result is achieved. But I would say to you that there is a very clear acknowledgement that if we are going to advance as a nation, and if we in politics will be able to achieve the credibility we desire, we must fully commit, all of us, to ensuring that these reforms happen. I will say that as a nation, we have our strength in adapting to change, and over the next 4.5 years, we are committed to implementing the things we outlined in our blueprint for change. Our capacity continues to be tested, but our response will prove that we are committed to a strong system of governance across both public and private sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to have an opportunity now to participate in public governance. I have been chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation, where we found it very easy to criticize what we find in public governance. I have participated in my previous life as a businessman very actively, where we often decried the roadblocks and the bureaucracy of public governance. And now I have been given an opportunity to be in a position to be able to confront some of the issues that we have complained about often through the chamber and through the private sector organizations and in civil society. And I will tell you that I am committed today, as I have been resolutely before, to ensure that we make advances to the issues that we speak of often. So you certainly have my personal commitment. You have the commitment of our Prime Minister and the government of the Bahamas, and we congratulate you for continuing your work over, I believe, almost a decade. And we invite you to continue to be steadfast and to continue to be immovable in your pursuit for good governance. And I want you to know that the leader of the opposition has conferred with me, and we recognize that you have very serious time constraints today. So when he comes, he will simply say that he agrees with everything that I said. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. And I do want to really just, those were powerful words, and I really want to resonate what you said around being optimistic change agents. I think we do need to somehow surpass this cynicism, and that has been developed out of natural and very normal circumstances to become cynical, because change, I think, is close, and I think we have to push for this last bit. So thank you so much, and Org stands ready to support with our other civil society colleagues in making the change happen. I'm very excited now also to welcome the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Michael Pintard. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Please join us on the dais.
Good morning, everyone. Let me begin first by referencing an important point raised by the Deputy Prime Minister He made a request that I'm hoping that your organization, that's doing an incredible job, would take him up on it. He's asked that you rate the government, you do an evaluation, and you rate them. And I think that's very noble of him. I just wish to publicly indicate that I am volunteering to assist you in that regard. It is good to be here with you. And to my parliamentary colleagues, I want to give you assurance at the onset of this 3-minute presentation that there will be no political fireworks at all here today, because I'm fully expecting that you would be coming to the convention to support me later on tonight. I want to congratulate the Organization for Responsible Governance for partnering with the United States Embassy and members of civil society, the private sector in general, to put on what is extremely important at a very pivotal time in the life of the Bahamas. I'm a cultural artist who happened to be involved in public life in this way. Culture, simply defined, is the things that we do in the ways that we do them that tell people who we are. And to the point raised earlier by the Deputy Prime Minister, there is a perception that we struggle mightily in terms of ensuring good governance in some of the most important institutions in our country. Let me say from the outset that I don't entirely share that view, but there is some merit, and I hope to touch on just a few of those concerns expressed by members of the public that I entirely agree with. It is important that stakeholders from all sectors of our society work collaboratively. It is unfortunate that both administrations have struggled tremendously in working in meaningful ways with other stakeholders on an ongoing basis. Sometimes we get it right, and oftentimes we get it wrong. As a cultural artist, one of the things that I certainly noticed over the years is that there are two voices in the Bahamas that are entirely too large. One voice is the political voice. Politics permeate every dimension of Bahamian life. And for many business persons, their ability to survive and thrive depends on their ability to access the system, which often requires, unfortunately, political intervention. This reality in our society is a drag on development. One of the largest employers in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, some would say by far the largest employer, is the public service. And rightly or wrongly, there is a perception that exists that we are deeply challenged as it relates to the efficiency and effectiveness of the public service to assist Bahamians in realizing their dreams and aspirations. Having worked in the public service, I can tell you there are incredibly talented Bahamians who do an incredible job. But what is also true is that an antiquated system mitigates against even the most talented public servants finding a way to deliver what is in their heart to deliver on behalf of the Bahamian people, and the political will by all administrations to take a deep dive into fundamental transformation of the public service simply has not been there. I go back to the top of the order. The political voice is entirely too large, too powerful in the Bahamas. It is amazing that in the Bahamas we boast of the high rate of voter turnout. Let's not refer to the most recent case, please. But the reality is, in a number of jurisdictions, most notably to the north, many citizens realize that their ability to succeed in any sphere of national life does not rely by and large on direct intervention from government. Government sees itself as a facilitator that is creating the right environment, the enabling conditions where persons who are industrious can in fact thrive. And I believe that the Deputy Prime Minister and myself share the view that in the Bahamas that is what is required, that government has to evolve into a facilitator more than what we are presently, in many cases, as the drivers of those vehicles that will stimulate development in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I mean, the truth is, the way we function, by and large, is to exact funds that many persons have worked to earn, business, private citizens, with the promise, the covenant, that we are going to effectively and efficiently manage those resources to do the transformative things that we have promised. The public, by their action, have pronounced a verdict on how effective our governance have been by changing us every single time over, I believe it is the last probably 5 election cycles, and we're poised to do the same shortly. And so my point is, I believe that increasingly we are headed in the right direction in that international standards and norms of good governance is taking hold in the Bahamas in very meaningful ways in the public sector, the private sector, and other stakeholders as well. But we are not there yet. Remember, I said the political voice is but one of 2 big voices. The other voice that's very large in the Bahamas is the faith-based voice. And I believe in many ways, faith-based organizations are the conscience of a country and play a pivotal role in terms of helping us to find our center and to connect in not just temporal but eternal ways, and that's important. But what is also true is that the political voice is often deeply influenced by the spiritual or the religious voice. Other stakeholders can and have had an impact on political choices made. One of the difficulties we have is that politics is very subjective. And so even when governments are minded to engage in good governance, there are other stakeholders in our society that can pull the levers if the numbers are significant enough. And you will find in some cases, important decisions that can change our country are deferred because we are unwilling to take the necessary political risk to do what is in the best interest of moving the Commonwealth of the Bahamas forward. A number of important pieces of legislation have been put in place by both administrations. In the financial sector, of course, the Procurement Act was passed and came into force in September of 2021. You have a Debt Management Act. We have been having tremendous amount of discussions about the Fiscal Responsibility Report that we are hoping we would see in its entirety within the House of Assembly so that we could discuss it. All of these pieces of legislation are designed to accomplish exactly the definition of governance, which is to make sure that there are proper checks and balances, that we're looking at the issues of risk and how do we manage risk? How do we ensure accountability and transparency? All of these particular pieces of legislation, unfortunately, they're coming with great frequency, particularly to small island developing states such as ours. 2 things about this reality. One is they're coming quickly because somehow we have not altered our behavior in some meaningful ways so that we don't need to necessarily be micromanaged in doing what is in our best interest. That's part of the story. The other part of it is there are some external factors, or better stated, external organizations placing demands on us, and we are capitulating to those demands by a number of multilateral organizations, most of whom, in their own jurisdiction, are not behaving in a consistent manner with the requirements that they have put on us. But given our strength in the global community, we comply. And quite frankly, my view is that it has been a hit and a miss, meaning that in some cases it has been in our collective interest as a country to be compliant with a number of the requirements by major international agencies, but in other cases it has constrained us, because surely we have lacked in some cases the capacity to implement the onerous requirements that have been placed on us. And of course, the political voice pays a price. Because Bahamians have a very interesting notion. We believe that we are at the center of the universe, and that we are powerful enough to withstand every and any force that makes requirement of us. And while in opposition, political figures reinforce that notion. We speak big about why it is inappropriate to move so fast and so deep in constraining and strangling our financial services sector. But once in government, both sides perform the identical dance. So a part of us improving good governance in the country is really to have a candid, open, honest conversation with the population about what our realities are internally and what our place is in the global community, in a very measured way, to explain. In many cases, we are refusing to have that conversation. And so in that regard, Matt, I want to say this is an important forum so that we can unpack these kinds of issues. Let me also say that decentralization is pivotal if we are going to be more effective and more efficient in the public sector. The Deputy Prime Minister talked about the need for stronger local government. And quite frankly, the average policymaker has tremendous concerns about it coming to New Providence. The power is entirely too sweet. And to devolve this authority is not an attractive proposition for many policy makers. When you look at the legislation that we craft, oftentimes you see a tremendous amount of power being accrued to the minister. This has some inherent challenges depending on the piece of legislation, because in essence, the slow pace of the public service sometimes can be attributed to the fact that some of the smallest kinds of decision require a signature from up on high. And even where it is not the case, public servants, rightly or wrongly, often attribute it. It's on the minister's desk. We have to decentralize government, and we have to take the time to have discussions with other stakeholders in terms of how that might be done effectively and efficiently. What is also true is that in the public service, the laws have really not been changed, the regulations have not been changed in any substantial way for decades. And so what we have is a hard-working group of policymakers in some cases, but a hard-working group of technical officers who, despite their best efforts, are unable to improve the ease of doing business in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas because we have not substantially improved the infrastructure and the ecosystem that we're working with. And so one of the challenges is for us to make a decision, public servants, policy makers, civil society, we have to make a decision that if we are going to get out of the challenging circumstances the Bahamas is presently in, we must have these honest conversations with some timelines, very specific targets, and to ensure that we move in a shared direction. I worked for a time in the environmental movement, and I found it to be quite disconcerting that despite the need for us to ensure that we have sustainability in our national development, and that is hinged on or anchored in our commitment to protecting our environment, both land, terrestrial, as well as marine, the policy-making apparatus of government would set up, through policy in some cases, barriers for us to accomplish what is essential for our development. The present government is going to embark on an ambitious climate change agenda, continuation of what we have left in place. And what is interesting about that is that when private sector groups, environmental groups, make a determination that they wish to question the manner in which we are approaching these kinds of issues, we then put in place mechanisms that hinder their voice and ability to have sensible conversations with government by doing cute little things like assessing costs, that in the event that you lose a judicial inquiry into a real sensible set of questions about why we are proceeding in that way, why is a developer permitting to function in that way, we end up creating a situation where organizations that wish to have a conversation with government, have access to information on what's motivating decisions, are afraid to do so because their pockets are not deep enough to take a risk on challenging, because at the end of the day, the cost is prohibitive. So we find creative ways to create silence. And that's why I'm happy to hear that the government will bring forth the freedom of information. Now, it is important, and it's inexcusable for any administration that passed it on, ours and theirs before. And so, as I wrap up, I just want to say once again, I think that this is a wonderful gathering. It is my hope that it's repeated quite often with additional subtopics that we can look at. I believe that the Bahamas is headed in the right direction. However, we are not moving at the right pace. And so I encourage all of you, particularly those that are not in government, to develop a righteous restlessness about how we are proceeding in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Righteous restlessness, I like it. I think that we're gonna get that on a T-shirt. I think that's important.
Have to go and vote.
Yes, but I do want to just thank both the Deputy Prime Minister and the opposition leader, because I think they've started us off with some real talk. Clearly, what is obvious from both sides of the aisle is that there is a need for another player in the room. And the other player in the room becomes civil society, the private sector. It becomes those of us that are outside of government to help and work not only in partnership, but also in a more aggressive way to make sure that those changes happen. Because in truth, the citizenry, the private sector, you are the constant. Administration may change, but you're still there, and the issues you were addressing were the same the day before or the day after an election. So in order to speak a little bit to that, we're going to ask Representative, who is also a member of civil society and private sector, or the Organization for Responsible Governance own chair of our Economic Development Committee, Hubert Edwards, also the CEO of Next Level Solutions.
Good morning. I stand on the protocol already established, and as you would have heard, some very important statements from both the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister, the Honorable Opposition. There's no clear definition, no single one definition you can find of good governance. But there's generally a clear consensus that it relates to political and institutional processes and the outcomes necessary for the goals of national development. I believe that the ultimate purpose of governance is to make the lives of the people of a country better. Governance should facilitate building a better, more progressive, and progressing society. Governance should create transformation, generate hope, and engender optimism for a more exciting future, which in turn inspire the citizenry to become actively engaged and committed participants of nation building. Nation building. I think that is critical. Governance at any level, every level, is to serve the greater good. You have heard messages between the Deputy Prime Minister and the opposition leader, which says exactly that. The culture of governance that we have observed up to now does not always serve the greater good. It is therefore best structured on some immutable principles. Commitment to the principles of good governance, the will and discipline to govern accordingly is one of the most dominant differentiator between high-performance nations and societies that struggle to facilitate growth and development. Kofi Annan once said, good governance is perhaps the single most important factor in eradicating poverty and promoting development. I think that's worth repeating. Good governance is perhaps the single most important factor in eradicating poverty and promoting development. Good governance is considered to be participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, and follows always the rule of law. Good governance is also considered to need or evidence a strategic vision. There should be innovation and openness, sustainability and long-term orientation beyond the normal short cycles. There should be sound financial management, human rights, cultural diversity, and social cohesion. It is clear that the principles of good governance are critical to a well-functioning and highly functional society. The greatest potential of a people is only likely to be secured in an environment where the principles are consistently embraced and great effort is exerted to build and sustain a culture of good governance. As Barack Obama noted, when all voices are being heard, when people know that they are being included in the political process, that makes a country successful. Permit me the privilege of restating the words of this great world leader. And I'm going to replace political process with nation-building process. When all are active actors in the task of nation building, embracing the obligation of nation building and doing it in the best interest of all, then that is what will make our country successful. Unfortunately, the political process often gets misinterpreted, and as a result, too narrowly defines the engagement necessary to build a nation. Former President of Nigeria, Obasanjo, was recently quoted in the Nassau Guardian as saying, "Democracy is a means to an end, and voting in and of itself is not the end of the democratic process, but an important aspect of it. The principle of participation must therefore extend beyond the point of simply exercising the right to vote." He continues, "Democracy must deliver dividends, security of life, food security, job opportunities, and other necessities. His statements effectively underlines the essence of good governance. It lies between the idea of democratic rights and privileges and the ability to deliver benefits for a people. The former is the starting point, and the latter is the noble objective of creating value for a country. Failure to function consistent with the principles of good governance undermines the potency of a nation's ability to grow and develop for its people to enjoy the fruits of that growth. It therefore demands proactive participation and activism to help to ensure that the best of us is unfailingly brought to bear on the development and progress of our society. This is why we are here today. This event is more than anything else a recognition that every person is a stakeholder and has a role to play in governance. Our active participation should be facilitated. But obviously, in a democratic arrangement, as we have here in the Bahamas, it cannot be coerced. Each person is therefore called to stand up, work hard, so that we can secure the most effective system of governance we can possibly have. So welcome to this important symposium. I'm confident that you will take away valuable information which will help you to improve the way you think, or might help you to improve the way you think about and engage in the governance process. Your participation, our participation, is necessary to hold our leaders to the high standard that the well-being of the country, its institutions, and people demand. While doing all of that, we are actively continuing in our own individual endeavors to work towards making the country better. We are all here today to secure knowledge, information, education, and advocate for progress. Knowledge is power. Information is liberating. Education is the premise of progress in every society, says Kofi Annan. And this is true, absolutely true. But commitment to good governance and the work to implement the essence of its principle are the only things which will secure progress and sustain a nation. The way forward will require real, and in the Bahamas, when you say the word twice, it means we're serious. Real commitment. The need for action is clear. The success of the Bahamas from this day forward is going to be through the vortex of the greatest suite of reform this country has ever seen, and that's my view. We are at a critical point in the life of our nation, and it's time for each of us in our various arenas to stand up, step forward, and work towards being the best example that good governance is supposed to be. It's time for you and I to step forward together for the sake of good governance, for the sake of country. Thank you again for being at this symposium. And I want you to remember that everything that we do here, now, inside and outside this room, should be funneled through one thing and one thing only. And that is what is in the best interests of the Bahamas and its people. I thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. I think those were powerful words to get us started. And Hubert also teaches us very often, he talks about the philosophy of Ubuntu, that all things are connected towards common purpose, and that working together brings positive movement. And I think that's one of the things I take away from that concept is the government power that we have, the latent power that sits in civil society, and the emphasis, the innovation that the private sector bring together is really the mix that we need to facilitate. One of the things I want to also acknowledge today is we're not alone in this endeavor, and we have partners. We have very positive partners, and one of those positive partners is the U.S. Embassy. You'll see a session later today that's hosted and organized, and they were able to facilitate us to bring greater opportunity to network as different members of our sector last night. But I would like to ask Bridget Primont to come up as a representative of the U.S. Embassy just to give us a few words on get us started. You've heard all the men talk now. Now it's time for the women to step up and let us know what we really need to do.
I think I need a shorter podium. Well, good morning, ministers and officials, members of civil society, and students especially. My name is Bridget Primont, as Matt said. I am the INL director at the Embassy. INL stands for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, which is a very long way of saying that I manage a program of cooperation on civilian security and also rule of law issues. It's my pleasure on this beautiful day, on behalf of the U.S. Chargé Usha Pitts, to welcome you all to this conference sponsored by ORG, as she sends her warm greetings to all of you. For the Embassy, this gathering is really timely because, as you likely already know, we live very close to the United States. In the US, our government is working to show citizens what democracy does for them. You heard from Chargé Pitts in her op-ed that was published earlier this week about joining the ongoing conversation on democracy here in the Bahamas and also around the world. Democratic governments must guarantee fundamental rights like exercising the right to vote, and diverse voices and historically disenfranchised communities must also be included, must be heard. Right now, expectations for governments are very high, and the challenges are great. COVID infections continue, but thankfully have diminished. Questions of climate change and sustainable development persist ever more urgently, and now, even just this week, there are challenges to our shared democratic principles from autocratic and authoritarian leaders. So my greeting today, I really want to focus on sharing good news and to invite you to join the United States in working to reinvigorate democracy. So I represent the United States. I thought I would give you a short snapshot of what the US government is doing to address global challenges and advance prosperity. To spur on economic growth, the US government has offered direct benefits to families, like child tax credits, and funded infrastructure through new legislation. The government is also looking to streamline processes required for the average citizen to access government benefits. We forget, but most people, at least in the United States, only ever interact with their government for things that affect their daily lives, like getting a driver's license. These processes should not be complicated. They should be efficient, transparent, fair, and equitable. But another line of effort is the government's commitment to fighting corruption. Because after all, corruption also affects how people access government services, just as it affects the health of our democracy. Democratic governments must guarantee fundamental rights, like something as important as exercising the right to vote. I think I've already read this page, so let me find where I am in my remarks. President Biden announced a US strategy to combat corruption last December. You might have seen this in the news at the Summit for Democracy hosted by the United States. We had almost 300 participants from like-minded nations, including a delegation from the Bahamas. This strategy targets the international dimensions of corruption and aims to curb illicit finance and hold corrupt actors accountable. The strategy and our broader democracy goals, such as supporting free and independent media and free and fair elections, will again figure as part of discussions at the next Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles in June. These efforts have come about because we recognize that the United States cannot successfully combat corruption unless we're doing it in partnership with other countries. And it's a process that takes constant recommitment, as the Deputy Prime Minister noted. We need citizens from around the region and from all over the world who believe in democratic values and free elections and efficient financial systems to join us in voicing your support. That is the conversation that we all are all joining in together today. So, the US and the Bahamas have a long history of successful democratic partnership, not only thanks to our geographic proximity and common interests, but through our shared values and cultural and, in many cases, family ties, which is why we are delighted to support today's event. We're eager to hear your ideas about how the conversation about democracy, transparency, and anti-corruption should unfold here in the Bahamas. So let's work together to move past the pandemic and build our shared region in ways that strengthen democratic good governance. Thank you again for including me today. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you again. And Charche is actually, I think, making her way to Abaco. So she's busy. And on that note, I also just wanted to reference, we're so proud to have folks that have come in for this event. We've had folks coming from Abaco. We've had folks who have come in from Grand Bahama. We've had folks that have come in from Cat Island. Folks, I think, even from Andros. So, Exuma, sorry, from Exuma. And so it does speak to, again, the point that what we decide in spaces here in Nassau needs to be reflective and responsive to the needs in our family islands, in our other communities. What we decide in communities where people maybe have access and privilege needs to be responsive and reflective of those folks in more vulnerable scenarios. And so that key of inclusion is going to be something you'll hear throughout the day. We heard a couple of themes in the opening comments, and just as a point of reference, we're going to move right into the next session. So our two next presenters, if you may make your way up, Dr. Yvette Pintard-Nouri and Daniela Carrera. But one of the things we heard is that there are a lot of pieces in place. And I do believe that's true. I think that we have a lot of the ingredients for change that Hubert referenced, that we heard from the DPM, from the opposition leader. We just have to now put those together. And so the cohesiveness of working towards good governance becomes, I think, the next challenge. How do we have, as the opposition leader talked about, a clear pathway so we see where our part is, where we can have input, how that input can be meaningful, how that can work. But we need to understand then the other parts. So our first session today, which I think is absolutely key because it is the place where governance becomes real life, is the level of reform in our public service. So this is a space where on a day-to-day basis, when you're talking to folks who might be in crisis, struggling with what am I going to eat tomorrow, or I don't have a job, or there's crime in my community, or my child's not getting what they need out of the educational system, they understand and know governance through the direct of, I couldn't get the service I needed today, or it took too long, or I had to find a way around, or I had to pay lunch money to somebody to be able to do what is supposed to be my right. And so we need to get this component in place, and once it starts to reform, it will work against some of that cynicism that we see has been developed and learned over time. So I'm very, very excited today to welcome two leaders in this space to talk to us a little bit about effectiveness and efficiency, and particularly public service reform. The Public Service Reform Initiative really speaks to how do we, in the middle of, because we're not starting from scratch, how do we take a system that has been ingrained and set in a way and start to then look for changes? The positives, not to reveal anybody's presentation, is that there are a lot of things that are happening. But we need to get a better sense of what those are and figure out how we can reinforce those and speak to those in power that those are the types of things we want them to continue to advocate on our behalf. So I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Yvette Pintard-Nuri and have her speak to us. We'll have our panel sessions, just as a matter of understanding, we'll have each speaker get a chance to speak for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll break back and we'll do questions. And for our folks on Zoom and in Facebook, if you put your questions in the chat, we'll be able to bring those forward and include them in our panel discussion. So with that, Dr. Yvette Pintard-Nuri.
Good morning, and thank you. Yeah, I need the short one too. And I commend org for putting this symposium on. It's always good to meet with people and discuss the changes that need to be made for us to create a better society. I'm pleased to see students here because they are going to be the ones who continue the process and make progress on what has been made. Public sector reform. We need government. So I'm going to break down the presentation into two parts, well, three maybe. We need what is it? Why do we need government? How does government work? And then we're going to talk about how change has happened in other places and what we can learn from them. So we need government for protection from external and internal threats, to provide services to those who need them, to collectively do what we cannot do so well individually, and to give opportunities for a range of things through investment in a range of public goods. Government interacts with citizens from birth to death, and sometimes after death. To provide these goods and services, government collects taxes. Can you go to the next slide? And you can see that government collects taxes from various sources. The 37% comes from VAT, and we're all familiar with VAT, right? So we realize that government is collecting taxes to provide these services to us. The delivery of public goods and services is carried out by the public service. Approximately 25% of government expenditure goes toward wages and salaries of public servants. So of the VAT that's collected and all the other taxes, 25% is going toward paying people to do what we need done. As the world changes, and first let me say that of the people who work in the public service, there are 20,000 about public servants, and out of the 215,000 labor force. So the public service, it represents a big portion of our labor force, as other speakers have already noted. And as the world changes, the challenges that we face have also changed. And the resources we have to address those challenges, both human and financial, have to be able to meet the challenges. Our ability to efficiently and effectively deliver public services point to our need to change. Efficiency speaks to what we get for what we invested in civil service. Effectiveness speaks to how well government does what it needs to do. In the Bahamas, we've inherited a Westminster system of governance. The parliament is elected, the party with the majority forms a cabinet to carry out government business. The Constitution states that the cabinet shall consist of not less than 8 other ministers, of whom shall be an attorney general, as appointed in accordance with the provisions of Article 73. I stop on this point because it's important to note that the Constitution speaks to a cabinet that is possibly only 8 or 9 persons in membership, but we see cabinets now that have ballooned to significant amounts. Why is this important? Well, it's important when we look at the efficiency and effectiveness of government. If we're looking for a government that's going to give reasonable opposition to points put forward on our behalf, we want a government that has, an opposition. We don't have an opposition by vote, but we definitely don't have one if the cabinet is so big that when they go to the parliament and they have to vote, those persons who are in cabinet cannot vote against their own party. So whatever cabinet says is the way things are going to go without any clear deliberation. That's another lecture for another day, but I just wanted to bring it to fore because it is a part of the efficiency and effectiveness of government. In order for ministers in the cabinet to collectively be able to do what it is that we have for them to do, that we've sent them to do, they need support. Our minister is set to carry out all major policy decisions by the cabinet. Each minister has a portfolio. The slide shows the Honorable Fred Mitchell because he's the Minister for the Public Service. And what we are going to be talking about is efficiency and effectiveness of government. And the Ministry of Public Service is responsible for changing government. Well, it is responsible for the manning of government, right? So in order for the ministers to collectively frame the policy and individually make decisions and see that they're carried out, they must have the services of an efficient public service. The Manual of Cabinet Procedures outlines that the public service must be impartial and responsive to its members. It must be nonpartisan in attitude and thus ready to service whoever are, as a result of a democratic process, elected to represent the people. This is important because it's important to have people who are permanent and pensionable workers who receive a part of that expenditure, that 25% expenditure from our taxes. It's important that they service all of us, because whether or not we vote for whatever party, we deserve service. And so these things are in place because for these reasons. And I think it's important to note that a lot of this is already written. It's already in the outline of the Manual of Cabinet Procedures, general orders, and various acts that govern public service behavior. We have permanent secretaries, directors, and other officials who have the responsibility to act in support of ministers' obligations to abide by cabinet conventions, and a responsibility to advise ministers in any case where they may perceive to be a breach or likely breach of these conventions. Ministers have a duty to give fair consideration and due weight to informed and impartial advice from public servants. The permanent secretary is responsible to the minister for the organization and control of the work of the ministry. The permanent secretary should ensure that the ministry functions to interpret, research, and advise the minister with reference to technical and legal matters. The PS also coordinates ministry matters internally and externally with other ministries to implement policies and evaluate to ensure efficiency and economy. To carry out these functions, the PS also needs resources to do so. So the PS relies on the rest of that 20,000 plus people, person labor force to carry out government's mandate. And we've known for years that the structure, the framework that government is in is not serving us well. We know that there are inefficiencies. We know that it has not always been effective. But we also know that there are people who are capable within the public service. The question is, how do we in turn now upgrade our service? And this is a challenge that has been faced by other countries. It's not just us who's facing it. I think every country in the world faces a challenge with their public service. We looked at 3 countries to compare what they've done so that we can learn from what they've done and try to implement it. The countries are case studies: New Zealand, Barbados, and Jamaica. The problem in New Zealand was not one of capacity. They had the people who were able to do what they needed to get done. But their problem was performance. People weren't doing it because they were not motivated to do so. So when New Zealand decided to go on and reform their public service, their civil service, they did it based on increasing outputs. And one aspect of the reform was to provide accountability frameworks between the ministers and their heads of government, who are known as chief executives. They passed the State Sector Act in 1988, and this permitted chief executives to work based on contracts. This contractual relationship gave New Zealanders measures of accountability for the outcomes that they produced. So they were told what to do, and they had to accomplish this, otherwise their contract wouldn't be renewed. So New Zealand, they recognized financial performance through reduction in departmental operating budgets, through staff cuts, through privatization and spending cuts. But New Zealand's story goes on. This focus on outputs and not outcomes compromised citizen-centeredness. So their public sector ethos of professionalism, providing for people in the public, personal responsibility, public service, those financial gains that they got, New Zealanders didn't feel as though this whole new system benefited them at some considerable level. So that same 1988 Act was repealed in 2020. And this new act seeks to address some of the shortcomings of the first act. The new act passed with the recognition that the wicked problems of the 21st century require collaboration. Collaboration is key, and flexibility, and it is attuned to a citizen-centered outcome approach. If what is being done is not being done for the people, it is not necessary to change, because it's the people that matter. In their 2020 Act, that is the essence of what they're saying. And it focuses on leadership. It focuses on strengthening the public service rather than individual leadership for departments. And it focuses on a whole of government approach to complex problems. So rather than sitting in silos, if we say there's a challenge with healthcare, for instance, and people aren't eating what they should eat. That's why we have so many NCDs. Well, why not discuss this with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, with education, with all other areas that impact how we eat, what we eat, so that we can come up with a cohesive result or a cohesive solution to the problems that we face. And this is what they're hoping to do with their new act, the 2020 Act. It is citizen-centered. That being said, scholars and practitioners note that it is impractical to consider that any approach can be easily transferred from one jurisdiction to another. And because we differ significantly in the way we do things, our culture is different. And because of that, we've looked also at reform measures that are closer to home. So in this region, Jamaica and Barbados have made attempts at public service reform. They too have inherited the Westminster Whitehall model of government. But like most countries, their civil service systems have moved away from these ideals. A desire to encourage economic growth pushed these countries to reform. they looked at implementing measures to reduce levels of politicization of their public service. So in Jamaica and Barbados, they experienced some of what we experience as well in terms of ministers appointing persons to serve in ministries above persons who have been working in those ministries, and therefore causing a morale issue throughout the public service. Because if I've been working all along and you've always said that you couldn't pay me more, but then you bring in your supporter and you give them a position over me and you want me to train them, there are going to be challenges in productivity and efficiency and effectiveness. So we see this, that Jamaica and Barbados, they had these same issues. They tried to move away from this. Jamaica moved away from the Westminster system to this new public management model that New Zealand had. And they formed executive agencies like New Zealand. And they tried to decentralize control. And we heard the minister and the leader of the opposition talk about decentralization as well. So we see that this is happening elsewhere. Everyone, like I said, there are a number of other countries that have the same challenges that we do. Jamaica also established a strategic plan with three of the 8 chapters of their strategic plan focused on human resource management. And so I'm going to focus a lot on that too, because it's important that we realize that people are at the center of everything. Even in reform, people are at the center. We're dealing with human beings. We cannot talk about staff cuts and those types of things in a community as small as ours when everything and everyone affects the other. So similarly in Barbados, they had unbearable fiscal deficits and a strong demand by the public for improved public sector performance. So their productivity and accountability increased the demand for public sector reform. They instituted an office to coordinate and monitor their reform efforts, providing feedback to indicate how changes were being played out at all levels. They integrated what they were doing. Integration is key. Once again, this whole of government approach, this approach whereby we're not duplicating efforts in silos. So in Barbados, we saw this for them, after the creation of their strategic plan, what they had was an employee assistance program. So as people were going through changes, because they did have to make some cuts, they also gave them the support that they needed to adjust to the changes in their lives. And that support included welfare at times, but also mental health care, well-being support. Because when people go through changes in life, they're going to need it, and they recognize that. And what they found was that increased their productivity, because people realized that people cared, they put out more. And they reduced their political interference in the hiring process. They completed strategic plans to guide the process of reform, and they acknowledged their need to build capacity. And this is with the focus on human resource management. In addition, the public sector rules and regulations to address issues such as accountability of public officers were revised. So, as was said, we haven't adjusted, well, we've made an attempt to adjust the Public Service Act bill. There was a Public Service Bill 2010, but it has not been enacted as yet. So we are making changes. The IDB actually did reports for 3 countries. The Bahamas, well, maybe more than three, but we looked at the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Barbados. And the Bahamas was described as an inefficient government bureaucracy. The key issues identified in this area are that the public administration relies heavily on paper. The operational culture across government agencies follows the silo model where information is not shared. Government human resources are inadequately trained to operate in a citizen-centered public sector and feel demoralized due to their lack of involvement in decision-making processes. And data is incomplete, outdated, and not integrated, which limits its use to support management and policy decisions. When one views the findings of the IDB Commission report on the 3 countries, and I'm sorry you can't see that, I guess it's too small. We see that when you look at the aggregated index, all of the reports are online, by the way. You see that the efficiency and functional capacity of the 3 countries are all below 60 out of 100. Jamaica actually leads with 54 out of 100 when looking at efficiency and functional capacity, followed by Barbados. But Barbados has been making steady progress. Their reform started later, and they're at 43 out of 100. None of these scores are good. But the Bahamas scores a dismal 19 out of 100 with regard to management in the public sector. We like to compete in things. Let's compete to be better at this. So after looking at what has happened and what is happening, the recommended actions is to have a political will. There has to be someone who champions change in order for change not to be spasmodic. You know, we've had little changes here and there, but there's not been a concerted effort to measure change, to even try to change. We need to come up with a national development plan. This draft plan that's been drafting for a long time probably now needs to itself to be revised, because things that happened in 2015, 2016, the statistics that affected us then, as a people, we've gone through so much since then. We now need to revise what our values are and work on that. We need to strengthen our human resources. We need to create a meritocracy. If we are going to be giving over 25% of our expenditure to the wages and salaries of persons to carry out government business, we need to ensure that those persons are trained well. We need to ensure it up front. We should consider a meritocracy. A lot of more forward-thinking governments insist that you pass an exam before you enter the public service, so that whether or not politics comes into play, at least we know you have the capacity to move forward. But we cannot work with, you're asking permanent secretaries to work with whoever a minister brings or whoever someone decides should enter the public service. And there should be at least a baseline for it. And we should provide training for those people too, and training should be ongoing. We cannot expect that persons who entered a system 20 years ago can still function at the same level when technology has changed and you haven't taught them how to use the technology. digitization and the management of information to continue the process for efficiency and effectiveness of service delivery is a must. And all of this needs to be integrated. It shouldn't be that you have to get your birth certificate or your NIB card every time you go to a public, for another public document. Somehow, a system needs to be integrated so that, and all of those documents should read the same thing. I mean, I've had instances where a person's name is misspelled on one document, and so they have to go back to the beginning and present the initial document. All of these are areas of efficiency and effectiveness that need improvement in service delivery. And I think for today, I thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, comments, or concerns, after Daniela speaks.
Thank you. That was we've just received a master class in public service reform. And Dr. Pintar Nouri, who is the associate professor of public policy at the University of the Bahamas, has been working in this for a long, long time. So when we get the information from her, it's well qualified. But I think, again, the ingredients, as I said, are there. We need now just to how we put them in our mix. One of our strongest partners in pushing forward and being able to afford to push forward on public service reform has been the IDB over many years. And I'm really glad to have Danielle Carrera-Maki, who is the country representative for the IDB, here to talk a little bit about, from their perspective, types of things we've done and where we're going. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you. Good morning. The good thing about being the last one is that she already said most of what I was going to say, so I don't have to repeat it, no? So that's a good thing, but no. And I'm going to be a little bit different from what I wrote, because I've heard everything that I've heard this morning from the words of the Deputy Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and all the interventions, the US, Matt, and everyone. I think my first comment would be, all of this has to start at the school level. As long as we don't put a lot more effort into really building education system that brings better citizens into the world, everything that we do top down is not going to really foster as much as we need. And that is needed to build a nation. And I heard that. This is about building a stronger nation. So it has to start at school. We all need, and this is not just Bahamas, we all need in all the regions, we need stronger citizens to defend democracy. And defending democracy is about governance, and it's about participation, and it's about voting, and it's about limiting corruption, and it's about having a better relationship with the governments that can provide us better services, and services that are equitable and accessible, and that will represent us regardless of who do you vote for. And if we think about this in this integral way, we can commit to be always the, I don't want to use the word police, but the person that is guarding the fact that whoever is giving us the services is committed and is performing the way they should. And this is key for sustainable, inclusive development. Without this, we won't get there. And it is so ingrained in what we do as an institution that our new Vision 2025 is basically corroborating what we already been doing, which is all of this development has to be done based on the rule of law, transparency, accountability, and the way that this happens is so that we foster a stronger, more resilient society, a society that feels more willing to pay taxes because it's going to receive the services those taxes are financing. A society that is more willing to see governments investing in things that are not immediate growth, as for example, preserving the environment, because they know that this means that their sons and their sons' sons or daughters are going to be in a more robust economy and society in the years to come. And a society that is more willing to have, you know, a stronger education, stronger investments in health, and that has a trained, managed, and robust public servant team that is going to be there no matter who you vote for. I'm a foreigner, obviously, so I have to be very careful what I say about politics in any place that I am. But what I heard this morning between the Deputy Prime Minister and the leader of opposition was extremely interesting. You see, because there are certain things that should be shared in terms of values in any society, in any government. Obviously, there are different ways of doing them, depending on what political party do you recognize yourself with. But if you consider that certain steps that have been taken are so important, no matter who is in the administration, you would have to say, okay, we will continue this. We obviously do it in our way of doing it, but things like the legislation that was mentioned this morning earlier, and how this is so important that it is implemented faster than what we've been doing, is of key relevance. The Procurement Act, the Freedom Act, of Data Act, all of that is what is going to put a country like the Bahamas in the next century in a more resilient way. So I do think that we have, as a society in the Bahamas, a great example of things that have been doing that I know when you're sitting inside, you think things are not moving forward. One of the beauties of working in a place like the Inter-American Development Bank is that you see a lot of what is happening elsewhere. And I can assure you that there's been a lot of advances in terms of the institutional framework, in terms of the legislation, in terms of, the processes to change from paper to digital, which is an extraordinarily difficult process. And I do have to say that thanks to PS Alois Delancey that is sitting here, that pushed us for many years, these processes in the Bahamas has moved a lot faster, stronger, in a better path than many other places that I've seen in the region. And we have to continue doing that. You have to continue doing that. You have to continue not only working with improving how do you manage the human resources in public service? How do you promote? How do you select? How do you train? How do you move forces from one area to another where you need it? So that is key to have the stronger corporate governance that the Bahamas deserves and requires to have more investment, to have stronger communities, to have a stronger growth, and a more diversified economy that can withstand some of the challenges Bahamas face because of the vulnerability to climate change, natural disasters, and as we've seen in the last 2 years, pandemics or health disasters. This is key. This is what really makes a society and a country and a nation more resilient. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy, Matt, for us to be here because this is what really bonds the whole group of stakeholders that want to have a stronger, more resilient society. So I thank you all. I was happy that I didn't have to go through all the indexes and the rankings. That publication came, by the way, in November 2018. That was exactly when I arrived here in the Bahamas. Finally, before I leave, I do want to mention another publication that I think would be of a lot of interest to some of you, although it doesn't have data from the Bahamas. We're trying to correct that. But it is to the center of this discussion, which is a publication that I think it was in December or at the beginning of the year. It's called Trust, the Key to Social Cohesion and Growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it is extremely related to this, because you need to trust the government, and you need to trust the government is doing their part, the same way the government needs to trust public sector and need to trust the private sector, and the civil society. So this is sort of like the glue that puts everything together. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And I want to also commend Daniela. There was actually an IDB initiative to work with civil society that was planned at exactly this same time. And they were willing to reschedule it so that we could be together today and they could lend their perspective, and then we could incorporate that into our civil society outreach next week. So thank you so very much. We're now going to move into a brief panel. I think we're a little bit off on our timelines. But I want to, we had some panel questions, and those, in the presentation, a lot of those were answered. You know, what reforms are underway and what's the status. So I'm going to drill down a little bit, and in org's capacity, because we do have we have the benefit of being able to work with those stakeholders in government, stakeholders in the private sector and civil society. What we've seen as we've looked at it is there are a real strong number of public service reform initiatives that are in place now, that are working forward. Additionally, we see so many talented and bright folks in the public service who are motivated and working on these initiatives, and there are some challenges as we move forward. So if I could start off with the question, what are some of those things you think we should really be thinking about and pointing to that are key efforts that are underway right now on public service reform? You know, your favorites, I guess, but also what kind of things should we be doing to kind of clear the obstacles so that these can develop and manifest the way that they were originally started and intended to?
Well, one of the things that's starting, in fact, it started, but once again, how do I put it? We don't seem to put consistent efforts toward any particular reform initiative. And so we start a lot of good things. We started the process of promotions and assessments for public servants, but once again, that was spasmodic. We had the first set in 2017. We didn't have them again until 2021. There are people who are in the service who've not been promoted after 9, 10, 13, years of service. That creates a level of demoralization. And so all of that energy that you're talking about, it goes away. The people who have really good ideas and a great desire to serve, they move away from it because they don't see initiatives being consistent. So I think part of what we need to do is ensure that reform is consistent. Establish an office of some sort that looks at reform, and I don't know if this is a part of this government's agenda, but to have an office that looks at reform and sees reform through, but not one that's going to be for 5 years. We need it to live beyond administrations. So just because one administration has an idea, As a people, we're continuously spending more and more money on initiatives, good initiatives granted, but not consistent enough to see the types of results that can be yielded if we monitor them. And I think, so yes, we have assessments, we have training, we have some level of succession planning perhaps. We have all of these ideas come up, and you may have one workshop, but that's it. That's not the way to do reform.
I would add that, at least in my perception, there are two key processes that are happening and that I see like really transformative and changing if, like you say, you know, there is a continuum. And these are not, shouldn't be seen as for one party or another. This is a nation endeavor. So the first one will be the digital transformation, this process that has been happening. And because digital transformation touches a lot of things. It touches not only the processes, but it touches the data, avoids the silos, into the data becomes more available for what is needed, with a lot of more access, and the quality of the data improves, eliminates the paper. So it's a really, it changes the whole dynamic between the government and the citizens and the businesses, but also between the agencies of the governments. So digitalization and data is key to getting to the place of, you know, stronger governance. And the second aspect that is also happening, and it was mentioned this morning, is about, you know, how do you manage your public finances? You know, you know, how stronger your procurement rules are, how clear it is how you procure goods and services, the transparency, the access of small and medium enterprises to be able to provide services and bidding processes and with the different levels of government. So if I had to choose, I would concentrate on that in addition to the public servants.
One more thing. I agree with digitization. I think too, as a people, and this is one thing we probably need to get to, is we have to have an ethos. We have to change our values, because we can put all the wonderful digitization systems in play, but unless people who are operating those systems have our best interests in mind and are not looking out for their own, we're going to be spinning this wheel again. And because we've seen digitization work, and yes, it is working in terms of service delivery for a lot of us, for many people, but those people without access, and then those people who are not trained to use the system properly, it's always going to be that.
I think that's key. I think, and there was questions from online related to digitization. You know, when will we become fully digitized? And I think that the solution is going to be this progressive, consistent movement towards where we're training and monitoring on all sides. The public needs to be trained and encouraged. We recently, somebody came and spoke to us about the fact that if you go to the government portal and you're paying online for one thing, it says you can't pay online for, say, your passport. But if you go to immigration, you can pay online for a passport. And so the simple mechanism of connecting or just putting that link on that section, it would change the dynamic. There's simple potential opportunities within what we do. And then changing those folks on the other side to be able to think about, this is about a user-friendly experience. One of the things that, Daniela, you talked about, which is one of my favorites, is the financial management. And it's hard for the daily citizen to get their mind around what that means. But things like the National Statistical Institute, which was an outgrowth of that collective effort, are starting to come forward. And that really is important for those that are in the data sciences or the information sciences, and we'll hear about that in one of our next panels. That represents the opportunity for us to really know where we are. And I think that not knowing where we are prohibits us being able to determine how we go forward and really measure it or show on consistent pathways what needs to happen. Because that dialogue to your elected official has to happen from the citizen to say, this is the thing I really care about. Not this is full of problems, this is what I need to solve it. There was a comment related to some of the discussions from our Zoom folks saying, yes, you may be working for 9 years in the same position, but are you performing and deserving of a promotion and cannot maintain social promotions basically solely on years of service? So, Dr. Pintard-Nura, you spoke a little bit about meritocracy. You want a few minutes or a few comments on that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There are some people who haven't been promoted, maybe because they're not performing, but the whole idea of having a system in place whereby persons can compete for positions based on what they know and what they can do versus persons, yes, being socially promoted as they are, just because they've been there for 9 years. Yeah, I agree. I agree with the person that that's something that we need to look at. But we need to look at it and put measures in place that are consistent. We can't have 1 year you take an exam to go on an assessment, and then the next year you don't have to take it. Because those persons who didn't pass the exam the first time would feel as though, you know, what was the point? I should have been promoted back then. You have to be consistent and you have to be fair. It has to be valid. There has to be a level of reliability. We just need to be a people that respects process.
Danielle?
I would just add that what you just said is exactly right. I mean, you need to be consistent and you need to be able to compare. And that comparison can only happen if you have clear rules, you maintain them. They don't have to be rules straight forever, but that you know the changes and you know the paths. And it's like any private sector or in an institution like the way I perform, that you have to be very clear into what are the things that you need to invest as a person in order to become a stronger professional so that you can actually be promoted. I think you have a question over there.
So sorry, yes. We'll have to meet in the middle here, sorry. And we'll only be able to do this one question because we do need to move to the next panel. So. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I have a question for Ms. Nori. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I was recently, I'm a public servant, I'm a civil servant. I was recently a part of a promotion exercise, and where I saw someone who did not even meet the basic requirements for the promotion actually get the promotion over me. Based on your presentation, I have two questions. How do you suggest that we motivate the demotivated public servants, most of millennials like myself, for the most part, considering leaving the public service and entering into public life, private work, where it seems a bit more attractive, even in terms of promotions and moving ahead. It seems a bit different than what we experience in the public sector. So my question is, how do you motivate a demotivated public service who, for the most part, we've seen governments come in and come out where when they're in opposition and when they're in government, they talk the talk of fairness and accountability and not interfering, but our realities are somewhat different. Question number two. You also spoke in your presentation about training the public service. Who should be responsible for training the public service? Because we have lots of superiors who are not qualified, who have not qualified themselves to be the persons facilitating the training, and nor do they see the need to facilitate training for public officers. I'll give you an example of a situation that I'm aware of where, again, the person responsible for professional development has not developed themselves. And so, I mean, who should be responsible for facilitating this development, this training of public officers when the person who has the delegate authority has not done so? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and we'll go ahead and take a response to that, and then we'll end up closed. Thanks.
I'll try to respond to that. It's a good question. In my mind, and from a theoretical standpoint as well as from a practical standpoint, the way to make change is to start. We're not going to get there unless we start to change. And the change to make, for me, in my mind, is a meritocracy. Because a meritocracy would establish that you have the capacity to accept training. You have the capacity to do what is necessary for the next level of your career. And I think it's a twofold responsibility. On the one hand, if you enter a service and you enter with certain skills and technology changes, then it is incumbent on both you and your employer to provide the opportunity for you to improve. However, if you are entering a situation, you should be able to do something. We should be hiring based on what is needed to be done, not based on you needing a job. A response in terms of people leaving the service and working in the private sector, because it provides better benefits to that person, sometimes I say go, and I say go not in any derogatory sense, but in a sense that you're still in the Bahamas and you're still making this place better. So if that is the means by which you're going to do it, great. Sometimes the system has to learn what it has to do to keep good people. And it's better for you to be good somewhere else than demotivated and not doing, unproductive there.